What if the biggest problem for the Cleveland Browns isn't figuring out who should be their quarterback, but admitting that the answer might be completely different from what everyone expected? Because the Shedeur Sanders versus Deshaun Watson battle has reached the point where every practice seems to raise another question. And the closer you look, the harder it becomes to separate football from everything surrounding it. Watson has the experience, the massive contract, and the history that once made him one of the league's most dangerous quarterbacks. Sanders has something very different, an opportunity to finally prove what he can do with meaningful reps. And now Cleveland has a quarterback competition that refuses to follow the script. The Browns still haven't named their starter, and that alone tells you how unsettled this situation really is. The original narrative was supposed to be simple. Watson, the veteran, would get his chance to reclaim the job. Sanders, the young quarterback drafted in the 5th round, would have to wait, learn the offense and prove that he belonged. But training camp has complicated everything. Sanders has shown flashes that have forced people to take the competition seriously, while Watson has had practices that ranged from encouraging to inconsistent. And that's why this story is no longer about who has the bigger name. It's about who can actually command this offense when the pressure starts rising. The first thing you have to understand is how unusual the Browns' quarterback room is. Cleveland isn't choosing between a proven starter and an unknown rookie. They're dealing with a veteran quarterback trying to rebuild his career, a young quarterback trying to establish himself, and Dillon Gabriel, another young passer who has shown enough accuracy and poise to make the room even more interesting. That means every rep matters, every bad throw matters, every interception gets discussed, every successful drive changes the conversation. And early in camp, Sanders has given people plenty to talk about. He hasn't been perfect. In fact, some of the biggest concerns surrounding him are exactly the things you'd expect from a young quarterback learning a new system. Pre-snap communication, procedural mistakes and penalties have shown up. Those issues cannot simply be ignored. But there's another side to the story. When Sanders gets the snap and the play actually begins, there have been moments where his accuracy, timing, and ability to move the offense have stood out. That's the part that has made this competition so fascinating. Because the Browns aren't looking for the quarterback who makes the prettiest throw during warm-ups. They're looking for someone who can process information, handle pressure, and consistently put the offense in position to score. And that is where Sanders has started creating real intrigue. Reports from early camp described Watson as erratic, while Sanders produced several strong throwing days. One practice even featured Sanders moving the offense farther down the field in a situational period, while Watson struggled to generate momentum. But then came the reality check. Sanders has also thrown interceptions, and Watson has had strong practices of his own. On August 5th, Watson reportedly had his best day of camp, looking more accurate, efficient, and decisive. That matters because it destroys the easy storyline that Watson is simply finished and Sanders has already won. He hasn't. Watson is still competing, and the coaching staff is still evaluating both quarterbacks. But the fact that the Browns continue to evaluate the competition instead of immediately handing the job to Watson tells you something important. Nothing has been decided. And that creates a completely different pressure on Sanders. He doesn't need to destroy Watson every single afternoon. He needs to keep making the decision harder. That's the real battle. Every time Sanders delivers a strong practice, Cleveland has another reason to give him more opportunities. Every time Watson responds with a quality performance, he reminds everyone why his experience still matters. This isn't a movie where one quarterback walks onto the field and instantly becomes the hero. This is an NFL quarterback competition, and the margin between winning and losing can be one decision, one read, or one mistake. There's also a bigger question hanging over the entire situation. How much should Watson's contract matter? His $230 million fully guaranteed deal remains one of the biggest financial commitments in NFL history. But contracts don't complete third downs. Contracts don't read coverages. Contracts don't throw touchdowns. At the same time, pretending money doesn't matter would also be dishonest. A franchise that makes an enormous investment in a quarterback naturally wants that investment to work. Cleveland has every reason to hope Watson can return to the player he once was. But hope cannot be the only evaluation tool. The Browns need production. They need consistency. They need someone who gives them the best chance to win. And that's exactly why Sanders' development is becoming so important. If he were simply making spectacular throws in individual drills, nobody would take the competition seriously. But when those throws begin showing up during team periods and situational football, the conversation changes. Suddenly, the question isn't whether Sanders looks talented. The question becomes whether he is talented enough right now to force Cleveland into a difficult decision. And there is another layer that makes this even more interesting. Sanders is no longer fighting only against the expectations surrounding Watson. He's fighting against the expectations surrounding himself. After being selected in the 5th round of the 2025 draft, Sanders entered the NFL with enormous attention, but far less certainty than the quarterbacks selected ahead of him. His rookie season didn't turn into the clean launchpad many young quarterbacks get. Now he's entering his 2nd year, learning a new offensive system and trying to prove that draft position doesn't define his ceiling. That's why these camp reps matter so much. Every snap is an argument. Every drive is evidence. And the more Sanders shows he can operate the offense, the harder it becomes to dismiss him as nothing more than a developmental project. But Cleveland isn't ready to make that decision yet. The coaching staff has made it clear that the competition is still ongoing, and the coming preseason work will matter far more than any viral practice clip. That's where the story gets dangerous for everyone involved. Because if Sanders keeps improving while Watson remains inconsistent, Cleveland will eventually have to answer the question nobody can avoid forever. Who gives this team the best chance to win? And that answer cannot be based only on salary, reputation, or what the franchise hoped would happen when the season began. It has to be based on football. And the next phase of this battle is about to reveal a lot more. Because training camp can create headlines, but preseason games can create consequences. That's where the Browns' quarterback competition moves from interesting to serious. The pads come on, defenses become more physical, timing becomes harder, and quarterbacks have fewer opportunities to hide mistakes behind the excuse that it's only practice. That's when Cleveland will learn whether Sanders' best moments can survive against a more realistic game environment. And that's also where Watson gets his chance to change the entire conversation. This is important because Watson has already shown that he can still produce strong practices. His best day of camp reportedly reminded everyone that there is still talent inside that quarterback. When he's accurate, decisive, and comfortable, the argument for experience becomes much stronger. The Browns didn't give Watson that massive contract because they thought he was incapable of playing quarterback. They made the decision because they believed he could be a franchise-level player. The problem is that belief has to eventually meet reality. And right now, reality is still being written. Sanders, meanwhile, has a completely different advantage. He doesn't carry the weight of that contract. He doesn't have to prove that Cleveland's biggest financial decision was correct. He simply has to play. That freedom can be powerful. He can attack the competition without carrying the same burden of expectations that follows Watson everywhere. But Sanders also has something to prove. The pre-snap issues have to disappear. The interceptions have to come down. The offense has to operate smoothly when the pressure rises. A quarterback can make spectacular throws and still lose a job if he consistently puts the offense behind schedule. That's why the next few practices matter more than any argument on social media. If Sanders cleans up the procedural mistakes while keeping the accuracy and confidence we've seen in flashes, his case becomes much stronger. And if Watson responds with several sharp practices of his own, the Browns may find themselves with exactly the kind of quarterback battle they wanted. A legitimate competition that forces both players to improve. But there's a third name that shouldn't be ignored. Dillon Gabriel has quietly added another layer to this situation. Gabriel has shown enough accuracy and consistency to keep himself in the conversation, even though the main spotlight has been on Sanders and Watson. That matters because the Browns don't have to choose between only two quarterbacks based on reputation. If Gabriel continues making good decisions and protecting the football, the coaching staff has another option to consider. And that makes every mistake by Sanders or Watson more expensive. Suddenly, one bad stretch isn't just about losing momentum. It can mean giving another quarterback more opportunities. That's how competition works in the NFL. Nobody gets points for being the most famous person in the room. Eventually, somebody has to win the room. And that's why the contract argument can only carry Watson so far. Yes, Cleveland has an enormous financial commitment to him. Yes, that investment is impossible to ignore. But the Browns also have to think about the future. If Sanders genuinely develops into a quarterback capable of leading the team, sitting him simply because Watson is expensive would create an entirely different problem. On the other hand, starting Sanders simply because he's younger and exciting would also be irresponsible if Watson is clearly playing better. That's the uncomfortable truth both sides of this debate have to accept. Money shouldn't decide the quarterback battle. Hype shouldn't decide it either. Football should. And that is exactly why Sanders has a chance to change the entire direction of this franchise. Not because he has already won the job. He hasn't. Not because every report says he's dominating Watson. They don't. In fact, the latest reports show the competition has shifted at different points, with Watson taking first-team work on some days, and Sanders receiving significant opportunities on others. Fun, but that uncertainty is the story. If Cleveland were completely convinced Watson was the obvious answer, there wouldn't be this much debate. If they were completely convinced Sanders was ready, they wouldn't need to keep evaluating. The fact that both remain in the competition means the door is open. And once that door is open, Sanders has a chance to kick it wider. The upcoming preseason opener becomes one of the biggest checkpoints. Not because one game will automatically decide QB1, but because game reps reveal things practice cannot. How quickly does Sanders process a defense? Does he handle pressure when the pocket collapses? Can he convert third downs? Does he protect the football? Can he sustain drives instead of relying on one spectacular throw? Those are the answers that will determine whether the hype becomes something real. Watson will face the same test. Can he string together efficient drives? Can he avoid the inconsistency that has followed him through portions of camp? Can he show the coaching staff that the veteran experience still translates into better quarterback play? And then there is Gabriel, waiting quietly for his opportunity. That's what makes Cleveland so fascinating right now. Nobody can simply assume the final answer. The Browns are at a crossroads where reputation, money, development, and performance are colliding at the exact same time. And if Sanders continues improving, the pressure will only increase. The most dangerous thing for Watson isn't one bad practice. It's Sanders becoming consistently good. Because if the young quarterback starts eliminating his mistakes while continuing to make the throws that have impressed observers, Cleveland won't be choosing between a veteran and a prospect anymore. They'll be choosing between two very different futures. One built around a quarterback the franchise already invested heavily in, and another built around a young passer whose ceiling they haven't fully discovered yet. That's the decision waiting at the end of this competition, and it won't be decided by social media arguments, fan loyalty, or a contract number. It will be decided by what happens between the lines. Right now, Shedeur Sanders hasn't proven that he should unquestionably be QB1. But he has proven something almost as important. He has made the Browns seriously consider the possibility. And for a player who entered this battle with so many people assuming he would simply be waiting his turn, that alone is a major shift. Now the pressure is on everyone. Watson has to prove he still deserves the job. Sanders has to prove his flashes can become consistency. Gabriel has to prove he belongs in the conversation. And Cleveland has to prove that when the final decision arrives, it will be based on the quarterback who gives them the best chance to win, not the quarterback whose story is easiest to defend. Because when the season finally arrives, nobody will care how much money was guaranteed. Nobody will care who won a practice debate. Nobody will care who had the loudest supporters online. The only thing that will matter is who can stand in the pocket, make the right read, deliver the football, and win games. And if Sanders keeps forcing that conversation, Cleveland may soon discover that the quarterback battle they thought would be about Watson's comeback has become a referendum on Sanders' future. The Browns still have time to make the decision, but every meaningful rep is taking them closer to it. And the next time Sanders gets his opportunity, the question won't simply be whether he can make another impressive throw. It will be whether he can make Cleveland believe that the future is already standing right in front of them.